My name's Dr. Ali Jennings. I'm a neuroscientist and I love stories. So much so that I want to share my passion for storytelling and the mind with you. In this episode, we dissect an old fairy tale classic, we'll talk to a Hollywood screenwriter, and I even get a unique MRI scan of my brain. All to find out why narrative has such a huge impact on our lives. Many years ago, a woodcutter lived with his wife and his 2 children in a little village called Oberkirch on the borders of the Black Forest. One year, there was a terrible famine, and the family didn't have enough food to eat. So, the woodcutter and his wife decided they're going to take their 2 children out into the forest, and they were going to leave them there to starve. The beginning of a good story really grabs your attention. It lures you in with something surprising or shocking. And this kind of intrigue is so enticing because it releases a certain chemical in your brain. And it's a chemical called adrenocorticotropic hormone. But no one actually calls it adrenocorticotropic hormone. Everybody just calls it ACTH for short. ACTH is the first of 3 chemicals that is going to be released throughout our brain during the course of this story. And each one is linked to a different aspect of the action. ACTH in the brain really focuses our attention on whatever surprising or shocking thing it was that released it in the first place. In this case, hearing that a woodcutter has decided to leave his children in a forest to starve. But it doesn't just do attention. ACTH also triggers stress. It puts our bodies and our minds into a state of readiness in case we need to fight or run away. And in this way, we're already starting to respond in sympathy to the situation of our characters. And as the ACTH levels rise and fall, they're doing it in relation to the drama of the narrative. The more drama there is, the more ACTH in the brain, the more stress that we feel, and the closer attention we pay to the story. At least, that's what the science tells us. But what does an expert think? Someone who actually writes stories for a living. I went to talk to Rob Hayes, a playwright and screenwriter for various Hollywood films.
We're at a point where stories have been built in such a sophisticated way that they mimic human experience.
Why do we even want to know about this character? Why do we even care?
The hard work is making people care about the character. Why are you telling the story in the first place? What do you want to express? What do you want to get across? Because fundamentally, that is what people are going to tune into.
No, out!
I've not done anything.
I said out! I said out! Come on.
Why do we care about the character?
We care about the character because we understand that what it means to want something, and we understand what it means for the path to that thing to not be easy. We know what it means to succeed, we know what it means to fail. It is satisfying to watch someone else dig deep, draw on their reserves to achieve the thing they want to achieve, because we know that's what life is like.
How important is it to empathize with the characters?
There is a certain recognition that starts to take place more and more. You've invested in their story, you've invested in their journey. The more dimensions you see to that person, the more you care about their fate and their future.
That sounds to me like that's kind of part of what stories are for.
It's like roller coasters, how roller coasters are built to give you that sense of fear, but in a totally safe environment. I think stories, they give you experiences that you wouldn't normally want to have, but you can live through them and experience them, and you can project yourself into the stories. You can decide how you would react.
Don't open that door.
Don't open that door. Get out of the house. All of that stuff. You know what I mean? Don't say who's there before walking into a room. That's how we project ourselves into these stories, and that's how we learn from them and grow from them. And I do think we become more sophisticated people the more we engage with narrative.
What's so interesting about talking to Rob is that he's brought up something I have never thought of, which is that I assume as a biologist that when something as powerful as stories comes along, something that releases so many chemicals and has such a huge effect on us, there must be a reason for it, that it must have evolved for a certain, purpose. What he's saying is actually totally different. He's saying that we're so good at making connections with people, we're so good at solving problems, that actually what stories do is they just ride on top of that. They just make use of it in a way that was never intended. But because we can create stories, we can sort of exercise that muscle. And although nature never designed us like that, we've worked out a way to kind of scratch that itch. So, the children have been abandoned in the forest, but the girl's clever. She's left a trail of breadcrumbs behind them. Now, all they need to do is to follow that trail all the way back home. But as soon as they try, they realise that the breadcrumbs have been eaten by all of the creatures of the forest, and they have no way back. So the children are lost. They're cold, they're frightened, they're hungry. They're desperately searching for somewhere safe to hide when the boy spots a house. It's a house made entirely out of gingerbread. But the children, they just can't resist. They run over to the house, start tearing bits off and shoving it in their mouths when the door bursts open and out steps a hideous old man. But instead of being angry with the children for eating his house, he invites them in. Come in, he says. I have real food in here and warm beds and a hot bath. But as soon as the children are inside, he slams the door, he throws the boy in a cage, and he locks the girl up in chains because the hideous old man is really a troll. It's difficult not to feel for the children, lost in the woods, trapped by a troll. And when we feel for someone, in reality or in a story, that releases another chemical in our brains. It's a chemical called oxytocin, and it's the second of our big three. Oxytocin helps us to form social connections. It's released when we bond with people, and it makes us more trusting. So as we learn more about the characters in the story, we release more oxytocin and we start to form bonds with them, and we want them to succeed. Now, something very strange has been happening without us even realizing. Our brain activity, yours and mine, has been aligning. And when an audience is captivated by a story, their brain activity starts to mirror that of the storytellers. We'll start experiencing the same thing. We'll literally be feeling the same emotions. If our heroes want to survive, they're going to have to solve a series of problems, each one more difficult than the last. And every time they do so, we're going to feel a little rush. And that's the release of a third kind of chemical in our brains, a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine is the brain's reward signal. It's released to tell us that we've done something good and to try and convince us to do it again. You know that moment that you solve a particularly difficult problem? The aha moment. Well, it's actually called that in neuroscience, the aha moment. And it triggers a massive puff of dopamine. And it makes us feel righteous. So, the boy sits, trapped in a cage. And every night, the troll goes over and he squishes his finger to see how fat he's got. But the troll is very short-sighted. So, every night, the boy holds out a bone instead of his finger, and the troll goes away dissatisfied. But eventually the troll loses patience and he decides he's going to eat the boy anyway, and he's going to have the girl for pudding. The troll stokes the fire and he gets it ready to cook the two children in. He tells the girl to go over and check that it's hot enough, and when she does so, he plans to push her in. Welcome to the climax. Our brains are on the edge of their seats. ACTH is peaking. Are they going to make it? It's the most stressful part of the story. Oxytocin is building, and dopamine is getting ready to reward us if our heroes rise to this final challenge. So, the troll told the girl to check the fire, and when she does so, he plans to push her in. But the girl pretends not to understand. And eventually, the troll gets so frustrated that he decides he's going to go over and show her how to do it himself. He goes over to the fire, sticks his head in, and bang! The girl slams the door shut, pushes him in, and the old troll roasts to death in the raging flames. The girl frees the boy and they both set off for home, but not before loading themselves up with treasure from the troll's stolen hoard. When our heroes outwit that troll, we get a massive rush of dopamine. I mean, the climax of a good story is very rewarding. ACTH also peaks at the climax, but by the end, we're riding a wave of oxytocin, of love for our characters and sympathy for the trials and travails that they've been through. So stories are powerful. I mean, everybody knows how it feels to get to the end of a great film. But what's the purpose of stories? Coming up, I head to University College London to put all this theory to the test, as I get an MRI scan whilst watching a classic indie movie. But will the results reveal more than I expected? This is fantastic. Welcome back. So far in this episode, we dissected the fairy tale classic Hansel and Gretel to look at the effects stories have on our brains. But now, it's time to get some real evidence. We've come to UCL to talk to Dr. Jeremy Skipper, who analyses people's brain activity whilst they watch feature films. And I am going to get my brain scanned while I watch the indie rom-com 500 Days of Summer. I think the first time I ever had my brain scanned, I was a student, and I didn't know anything about the brain, really. I was supposed to know about it, but I didn't. Now, this is like 10, 12 years down the line, and I do know a lot more, so I'm a lot more excited to hear about what's actually going on in my brain. I feel like I'll understand it a lot better.
I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing. So we're trying to understand how the brain processes all kinds of information as it does out in the real world. So psychologists spend a lot of time studying how attention works, or how memory works, or how language works, or how emotions work. But we're trying to understand how the brain processes all that information at once. And so how the brain networks that compose how you understand the world around you work in these kind of natural environments.
I filled in this colossal form explaining that I have no metal on me and that I have no medical conditions, and I'm ready to go inside what I understand is basically just a colossal magnet. We do have an actual expert who can tell us what an MRI is and does.
Right, so you're right, it is a colossal magnet, really. That's why you can't take any metal in, because it will get attracted to the magnet. It can start flying around. So we're gonna make sure you're not carrying any little coins or anything in your pockets. MRI is non-invasive. It's not like X-ray or anything. But yeah, we have to make sure there are no bits of metal in the scanner. It uses a strong magnet combined with radio waves to make images of the tissue inside your body, which is pretty cool. So at the end, you're gonna see a picture of your own brain.
Why'd you have to watch the whole film for you to be able to analyse it?
That's a really good question. Technically, we don't. We could probably get away with 5 minutes, but in order to be able to understand the narrative or the story structure, which I think is important to you, we need the whole film.
What's so exciting about this for me is that I know that this experiment that I'm about to do is something to do with narrative, and it's an MRI, so it's going to scan my brain, so I'll get to see what my brain looks like on narrative, as it were. And I've never been able to do that before.
to remind you, you're gonna watch a really nice film, so just relax, but try to keep really, really still. Try to not move even a millimeter if you possibly can.
The ultimate goal is to get 600 people watching 100 films in 10 different genres and to compare brain activity across people.
This is basically the area of his brain that we're scanning. So this is really what you're measuring. You're measuring tiny changes in brightness, which is basically changes in the amount of oxygenated blood. Hey, well done. That was fantastic. Hey.
That is
Well
exhausting.
done.
Thank you. So exhausting. Oh wow.
This is your brain.
Alright, that's my eyes, those two horrible kind of like black that's things there, right? Frontal lobes going back, that's the midbrain here, that's kind of like motor and somatosensory cortices, like there, so they do motor and touch, and then down about here, that's auditory cortex, and then go back, so here we go, right, okay. So this bit, you can see there, see that sort of weird squiggly bit there? That's the cerebellum, that's involved in like balance and all stuff like that. This is unbelievable. I've never seen my own brain in this detail like this, ever. It's just unbelievable. I feel pretty emotional after that, actually.
Seeing the inside of your head.
Yeah, it's pretty emotional. So actually, right, at the end of the film, I'm now riding on a wave of these three big chemicals, like ACTH and dopamine and oxytocin. And oxytocin especially. So I'm feeling a bit, you know, I got my brain scanned about a month ago, and we've come back to see Jeremy after he's analysed all the data to see what was going on. We're going to see what my brain was doing whilst I was watching that very long 500 Days of Summer.
Your brain looks a little lumpy for various reasons. I've taken your brain and co-registered it with an average template brain so that we can make comparisons across humans. These are correlations of your brain activity, the networks of your brain activity, with particular features.
This is about looking at the activity in that part of the brain and seeing when it's active and when it's not.
Yeah, and seeing what else is active with it.
Oh, I see. What's so interesting about that is when this part of the brain sort of flashes, when it lights up on this kind of analysis, it tells you that there's dopamine in the brain. There's just lots of dopamine around. And what Jeremy's done is he's used that and he said, well, okay, when this is lighting up, what else is lighting up as well? So where is dopamine really important during this story?
You can see here that a lot of the ventral striatum is active in your brain. About 40 minutes into the film, your brain is, for some reason, really lit up this network. And in fact, we've analyzed your brain over the entire course of the film, and it seems that over the entire course, your brain gets more and more and more dopaminergic activity or reward. So it's like the movie becomes more and more rewarding as it goes.
That is amazing. And that would kind of make sense as well, because you would think that the better the film, the more rewarding you'd find it.
Yeah.
Which means the more dopamine related activity you'd see on screen. So it's a way of getting like an objective reading of how much someone enjoys a film.
How much your brain enjoys this film, yeah. We have all sorts of networking activity in your brain that involves your motor cortices and your somatosensory cortices. So motor cortices are the things that you use to actually move your own body, and somatosensory cortices are the things that you actually use to feel when people touch you or you grab things and you can feel them in your hand. Why would those be active while you're watching a film? You're sitting perfectly still in a scanner. We think that we understand other people's actions by relating them to our own movements and our own feelings and our own bodies. So you understand the characters, therefore have empathy with them because you've put yourself in their shoes.
That's amazing, that just watching it, as long as once you've got that kind of empathic, emotional connection, you can actually start to feel the movements of the character.
It looks like you're performing actions, but we know you're just sitting still in the scanner.
Are there any differences between that activity and the actual activity that would happen if I did that thing?
That's a really good question. So there must be some differences somewhere else you'd be moving around in the scanner. And so we think those differences may be inhibitory processes. So in order for you not to move, your brain has a set of inhibitory processes so you don't move while you're simulating these actions, is one theory, but there's a bunch of theories.
So you found that looking at the parts of my brain which focus my attention, that they are increasing in activity as the film goes on. I'm focusing more and more attention on the film.
So networks that are said to be involved in attention increase throughout the film, which might be a good hallmark of what makes for a good film. So if like you're attending more and more and more, then maybe you're getting more and more invested in it.
It makes sense, I mean, because you're releasing the chemicals that would make you focus on it. So it would make sense that those parts of the brain would be active.
Yeah. I mean, one could expect the opposite too. So if it was a really bad film, this curve might be the opposite. Here's one for empathy.
What?
So empathy is sort of low at the beginning, and then it spikes and then drops, but the general trend is upwards. This is your theory of mind plots.
So this is kind of like my ability to understand other people's thoughts.
So it's really bad at the beginning.
And
Increases,
marginally
drops
better.
a little bit, and then increases. There's actually a point in the film in which something surprising happens, and your ability to understand that probably dropped at that point.
So I understand. Then they do something I was not expecting. I'm like, oh my God, I don't actually understand them at all.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. I can see what's happening in my brain whilst I watch a whole massive story. So what are the applications for that?
The real reason I'm doing this has nothing to do with storytelling. It's really about trying to figure out how the brain does all the processes that we as psychologists and cognitive neuroscientists and cognitive scientists have said that we do as humans. So we say that humans do attention. We say that they do memory, they do working memory, they do emotions, they do decision making, they do theory of mind processing, they do action processing. Every scientist in this building studies one component of that, but we have no clue about how all those things happen at once in the brain. So I think it's important for helping people, for fixing people when they have disorders or they have brain damage.
Oh, right. Okay, so and what about stories? How does this affect how we understand stories, how we tell stories?
An offshoot of all of this research that I'm doing actually has important implications for storytelling and maybe even making better or more engaging films. So we now have an intimate picture of all of the brain networks that are active while you're processing a film. We have markers of whether people liked films and whether they did well in the box office. So we can now engineer Franken movies that really just like engage processes to extremes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Throughout this journey into the mind, one thing that struck me is how our brain reacts to stories in a way that goes beyond emotions. My MRI results show that the mind recreates an actual physical reaction to a film, as it would with plays that we see or books that we read. We become truly immersed in a story. Our understanding of stories' effects on the brains has only just begun, but one thing is for sure, stories have a bigger impact on our lives than most of us would ever expect.